You can choose how you show up in the world. And even if you talk to 100 different mentors and 95 of them think you're an idiot and don't want time with you, the 5 who do will change your life, and that's all you need.
You're watching Young and Profiting Podcast on YouTube. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hala, and on Young and Profiting Podcast, we investigate a new topic each week and interview some of the brightest minds in the world. Before we get started, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified every time we drop a new video. Hey, Alex, welcome to Young and Profiting Podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be with you.
Likewise, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. You are the definition of someone who is young and profiting. You are known to be one of the youngest best-selling authors ever. You are also one of the world's youngest venture capital executives, which landed you the Forbes 30 Under 30. You are also Business Insider's most powerful people under 30, and you are truly paving the way for young entrepreneurs. And before we get into your book, Third Door, I want to take you back to a very pivotal moment in your life. You were in college, from my understanding, just a month into college as a pre-med, when you realized it wasn't the path that you wanted to take. So what was going through your mind at that point, and why did you make that decision?
I was lying on my dorm room bed, staring up at the ceiling, going through the what do I want to do with my life crisis. And for anyone who's ever felt that, it's this all-consuming thought where it follows you in bed, in the shower, when you're riding your bike, it sort of haunts you. And to understand why I was going through it, you have to understand I'm the son of Persian Jewish immigrants, which pretty much means I came out of the womb, my mom cradled me in her arms, and then stamped MD on my behind and sent me on my way. And you might think I'm kidding, but I literally wore scrubs to school for Halloween and thought I was cool. That was my childhood growing up. And in high school, I checked all the boxes, studied for the SATs, took all the biology classes, went to pre-med summer camp. So by the time I got to college, I'm the pre-med of pre-meds. But, as you mentioned, that's how I found myself on that dorm room bed, looking at this towering stack of biology books, feeling like it was sucking the life out of me. And at first I assumed, I'm probably just being lazy. That's what everyone tells people, especially if they're young and they're not feeling good, you're being lazy. But eventually I began to wonder, maybe I'm not on my path. Maybe I'm on a path somebody else has placed me on and I'm just rolling down. So now, not only did I not know what I wanted to do with my life, I had no idea how the people who I looked up to, how they did it. How did Bill Gates, when he was also in college, how did he sell his first piece of software out of his dorm room when nobody knew his name? How did Spielberg, when again, he was around the same age, become the youngest major studio director in Hollywood history without any experience? These are things they don't teach you in school. So I just assumed there had to be a book with the answers. So I started going to the library and ripping through business books and biographies and self-help books, assuming there had to be a book, not on a particular age in life, but really a stage. When you have a big dream, when you have a big goal, no one's taking you seriously, no one's taking your calls. How do you find a way to break through? And eventually I was left empty-handed. And that's when my naive 18-year-old thinking kicked in. I thought, well, if no one's written the book I'm dreaming of reading, why not write it myself? And, I thought I'd just call Bill Gates, interview him, interview everybody else. And I thought I would be done in a few months. That I thought would be the easy part. The hard part, I figured, was getting the money to fund this journey. I was buried in student loan debt. I was all out of bar mitzvah cash. So there had to be a way to make some quick money. So 2 nights before final exams, I'm in the library doing what everyone does in the library right before finals. I'm on Facebook. And I'm on Facebook and I see somebody offering free tickets to The Price is Right. And I'm sure you know the game show, it's the longest running game show in American history. And I was going to school in Los Angeles, not too far from where the show filmed. And my first thought was, what if I go on the show and win some money to fund this book? Not my brightest moment. Plus, the show was filming the next day. I had finals in 2 days. It was a bad idea. And I told myself it was a dumb idea and to not think about it. I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where an idea, no matter how crazy it is, it keeps clawing itself back into your mind.
Oh, yeah.
So that night, I decided to do the logical thing and pull an all-nighter to study. But I didn't study for finals. I studied how to hack The Price is Right. And I went on the show the next day and did this ridiculous strategy and ended up winning the whole showcase showdown, winning a sailboat, selling that sailboat, and that's how I funded the book. And that's how the journey got started.
Wow. So I know this story because I did research on you. So you sold the boat for like $16,000. Now you were able to, embark on this journey, which was pretty expensive because you basically planned to fly around America and interview your idols and do whatever it took. But how did your parents react? Because did you pause school or did you drop out of school 100%? Like what was that?
It happened in stages. And I think whenever you're on the precipice on taking a big change in life, it can feel daunting that it has to be this one big giant leap. Oh, you just got to quit your job and never look back. The reality is, and especially when I've studied success over the past 10 years, every single person who achieved their dream normally didn't take some reckless leap. They took one courageous step after another. So, for me personally, it started sort of small. First, it was just deciding over summer vacation, I wouldn't take, pre-med classes over the summer. Instead, I would work on the book. And then the next year, it was switching from being a pre-med to going to a business major, which, by the way, these weren't small things. This was like my identity. My parents came from Iran as refugees with the single hope that, I would have a secure, safe life, unlike they did. Mm-hmm. And then from there, the next year after that, the book started getting a little bit of momentum, and I was so close to getting that interview with Bill Gates and that publishing deal that I took a semester off from school and I went from there. So in hindsight, it's really easy to say, oh, I just dropped out of school. But the reality is it's one terrifying step after another.
I love that you showcase that because I was reading your stuff and it was really positioned, or I assumed that it was like cold turkey, but that's a great lesson to know. Even with like starting a side hustle, you don't need to quit your full-time job right away. It's okay to kind of ease your way into something, see if it's actually going to take off, see if you get momentum, see if you like it before just, cutting the cord.
Absolutely. One of the most surprising things I learned in my research on Bill Gates leading up to my interview with him was that he didn't drop out of school the way, the media makes it sound. You look at a headline and it said, dropout Bill Gates becomes richest person on earth and things like that. The reality is Bill Gates started Microsoft when, he was in college from his dorm room with his buddy, Paul Allen, and they decided to take one semester off to see if the company would get some momentum. And do you know what happened after that? They realized it wasn't getting momentum and Bill went back to school. No one ever talks about that. But that's just the reality. If open his biography, it's right there.
That's amazing. And
he went back to school, tried it again. And then after that, took another semester off and then it started picking up. And I think our society, in particular our generation, we grew up with tweets and now with TikToks, and it's so easy to compress years and years of someone's journey into 60 seconds. But the reality is, especially when you're studying success, it's a lot more gray.
Yeah.
It's a lot more little steps. A tipping point is only available in hindsight. The reality when you're going after your journey, and especially if anyone listening is in the trenches right now, it's okay that it's not happening overnight. It takes little step after little step.
It's so true. It's such a great point. So we were talking offline and you were asking me how long I've done Young and Profiting podcast. So it's been about 4 years, but it was a 10-year journey. And when I started the podcast, I had big guests from the gate because I had this really inspiring story. I almost had a show on MTV. I was like, on Hot 97. And so people believed in me, and it was kind of easy to get guests off the bat. And I was punching above my weight from the start.
That's great. That's nice.
But with you,
I don't know what that feels like.
Yeah, I want to know what it was like for you because you were 18 years old and from my understanding, no track record in media. How did you get in touch? You interviewed Tim Ferriss, eventually Bill Gates, Steven Spielberg, these huge names. So what was your strategy like overall? And then I'd love to do like a rapid fire and get some of your crazy wild stuff.
Well, it was a lot more Forrest Gump than Albert Einstein when it came to my strategy. The reality is, to my surprise, Bill Gates normally doesn't do interviews with 18-year-old college students. So my simple idea turned out to be a lot harder than I thought. And the book ended up taking 7 years. 7 years of, hard work and sweat. But eventually it happened. It took 2 years to get the interview with Bill Gates. It took 3 years to track down Lady Gaga, and every single one was different.
Mm. Yeah. So you're saying every single one was different. Well, tell us the story. I'd love to hear, for example, how you got in touch with Lady Gaga. You brought Lady Gaga up. So let's start with her.
Lady Gaga, again, that was one of the final interviews of the book. It's one of the final chapters because it just took so long. And with all these people on it, you worked in, radio in particular, every one of these people have multiple gateholders. There's the manager, there's the agent, there's the manager's manager, there's the assist, there's like 15 people who all claim they are the decision maker. So you can get lost in those worlds. But thank you, Lady Gaga in particular, it just so happened I, met someone named Matt Nicholson, who worked with Lady Gaga and helped her on, her digital projects. So he brought me in through that door. And what I learned is that, and I actually learned this from studying Steven Spielberg, that every single story, without exception, whether it's Warren Buffett in finance, Maya Angelo in poetry, every single one of these people always had that inside person, an inside man, inside woman, someone inside of the organization that they were trying to get into, who believed in them. And you actually brought it up earlier, who believed in them as a person before the idea had any feet, believed in them and was willing to open that door and bring them in. So with Steven Spielberg, it was a man named Chuck Silvers who helped Spielberg get his first contract. With Warren Buffett, it was an investor named Benjamin Graham. But when you read a magazine or you turn on CNBC, those things aren't talked about, but that's the reality of how the world actually works.
Yeah. So basically you went and found the inside man, the person that could hook you up with the person you actually wanted to meet and you would get in their good graces. So how can we go about finding an inside man? Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah. My favorite, I just referenced the Spielberg story. To me, the Spielberg story is the best case study of how the inside man, inside woman actually works. And the reason I love this story is what most people don't know is that the way it started is when Steven Spielberg was, 17, 18 years old, he applied to film school and he didn't get in. And then he applied a second year to USC Film School and he still didn't get in. And that's where most people would normally stop their journey and think they're not cut out for it. But Spielberg decided to take his education into his own hands. So he signs up for a community college in Los Angeles so he can sort of be around the industry. And he goes to Universal Studios Hollywood, the theme park. And for those of you who have been at the theme park, there's a ride called the tram ride that takes you on the back lot of the studio where you can see where the movies are made. So Spielberg goes on this little tour bus and about halfway through jumps off the tour bus, hides in the bathroom and waits for the bus to keep driving. And Spielberg walks around the lot on his own. And about an hour in, he bumps into this older man named Chuck Silvers. And Chuck Silvers sees this like pimply faced kid and says, what the hell are you doing here? And Spielberg told him the truth. He said, look, I'm so sorry. I jumped off the bus. I, always dreamed of being a director. And they end up talking for about an hour. And Chuck Silvers was the head of the Universal Television Library, the head of all the archives. At the end of the hour, he says, Steven, how would you like to come back onto the lot? And Steven goes, that would be a dream. So Chuck Silvers writes him a 3-day pass. And Spielberg comes back the first day, he comes back the second day, he comes back the third day. And on the fourth day, he shows up again wearing a suit, carrying a briefcase, and just walks to the security gate, waves his hand in the air and goes, hey, Scotty. And the guard just waves back and Spielberg walks right through. And he does this for months. He's sneaking onto sound stages, going into editing booths, asking directors and producers out to lunch. And he's essentially creating his own film school from scratch. But what happens after a few months is Chuck Silvers slowly becomes Spielberg's mentor. And Chuck Silvers gives him one of the best pieces of advice a mentor can give someone. He said, listen, Steven, stop schmoozing on the lot every day. Go create something of value. Go create a short film of quality and don't come back onto the lot until you have it ready to go. So Spielberg took that hard piece of advice to heart and he went and spent months filming and editing a short film called Amblin. And he went back to Chuck Silvers and showed it to him. And it was so good that at the end, a single teardrop came down Chuck Silvers' face. And Chuck Silvers picked up the phone immediately and called the vice president of Universal Television, Sid Sheinberg, and said, Sid, I have something you got to see. And Sid said, listen, there's a lot of things people tell me I got to see. And Chuck Silvers said, no, if you don't watch this tonight, someone else will. And the vice president said, you think it's that damn important? And then Chuck Silvers says, yes, it's that damn important. And sure enough, the vice president watched it that night. Spielberg the next morning got a call from the vice president's office saying he needed to be on the lot immediately. Spielberg rushes over, and on the table is a contract making the youngest major studio director in Hollywood history.
Wow.
And the reason that story is so powerful to me is, yes, of course, Spielberg was tremendously talented. If he wasn't talented, this never would have worked. However, I think we can both agree there must have been at least a handful of other talented directors in Hollywood at the time who didn't get that contract.
Mm.
And when you look at what made Spielberg different than everyone else, is that on top of the talent was his ability to find this inside person, his ability to have the courage to jump off the bus, talk to Chuck Silvers, tell him the truth about his aspirations, not being manipulative, but tell him the truth, and actually follow his mentor's advice and actually do the hard work. Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't for Chuck Silvers, Spielberg never would have got that pass to come back on the lot. He never would have gotten that good advice. And most importantly, there never would have been someone to get the vice president to pay attention. And in everyone's career, whether you're launching a podcast, writing a book, starting a business, trying to get a promotion, it's always that inside person who believes in you, who uses their social capital to kick the door open and help you get in.
This is so powerful. You are dropping bombs right now of knowledge. So thank you so much. So I want to get into a couple of your kooky stories. And I think Tim Ferriss and Larry King, I think, would be two great ones. So tell us about how you met
you
Tim
definitely
Ferriss.
named two of the kookier ones. With Tim Ferriss, again, you have to understand, I'm at the time 18, 19 years old. No one wants to talk to me. No one wants to answer my emails. So with Tim Ferriss, what ended up happening was, because at the time, Tim was one of the youngest best-selling authors in American history. So I felt if there's someone who had to have some kind of insights for me, it had to be him. Mm. So I ended up, one of the things that I would do in the beginning of the journey is I had a little note card that I printed out in my dorm room. And it just had a list of all the people I wanted to interview. And because I didn't have any real connections, what I would do is just whenever I would literally, whether it was on my college campus or anywhere I would go, whenever I would tell someone about the book, I would show them the card. And you would be surprised if you show it to 10 people, 1 out of 10, they won't know a person on the thing, but they'll have an idea for you. And they'll say, Spielberg is actually going to be speaking I saw in the LA Times, he's going to be speaking at this event. Or, I heard Buffett has this thing. I actually have a friend who met Buffett, So I would carry this card with me wherever I would go. And one of the people I met in the first year of working on the book was a man named Cesar Bocanegra. And he worked for a nonprofit called DonorsChoose.org. And I showed him this card and he goes, oh my God, my boss actually went to high school with Tim Ferriss. So by the way, all these things are so random, you don't think you're ever going to find someone who went to high school, it's so random, but you just sort of got to keep putting yourself out there. So he goes, let me ask my boss. And sure enough, I never heard back. Cesar said he would talk to his boss, but I never heard back. So I decided to just take matters into my own hands. And I just started emailing Tim Ferriss's assistant asking for this interview. And I emailed 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, 10 times. No response. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's a lost cause. And right as I'm about to give up, I'm checking my inbox and I see sort of like a newsletter spam. And it's for an app that I used on my phone called Evernote, a note-taking app. And it said, the Evernote conference in San Francisco this summer featuring best-selling author Tim Ferriss as keynote speaker. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my dream. All I have to do is go to this conference. I used the money from the Price is Right. I think it was like $50 to register. And I was like, oh my God, this is my dream. And I bought my first ever plane ticket by myself. And I go up to San Francisco. And what I did though, is because I knew Tim was involved with DonorsChoose.org, that company where, Cesar worked, the nonprofit. I took a Donor's Choose gift card in my back pocket, just in case. And I also, for some reason, decided to print all 10 emails I had sent Tim's assistant, put in my back pocket too. I don't know why. I needed some kind of safety blanket. So I think this is a genius plan. It's a conference for an app. There's no way, anyone else is there to talk to Tim Ferriss. This is my dream. So I get there, I show up to San Francisco, I'm 19 years old, and I step into this conference hall. And almost every single person there has a copy of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, under their arm. And it hits me, every single person here has the exact same idea that I do. Everyone is here to talk to Tim Ferriss. So I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? So I decided, all right, I'm going to take a seat right at the front of the stage on the far left side where the staircases are. So when Tim walks off the stage, I'll be the closest person near the stairs. So I can be the first person to talk to him. So I sit right in the front row, I think I'm a genius. I think I just hacked the whole system. The lights turn on, Tim walks on stage from the far right side. So now I'm on the complete opposite side of the entire conference hall. So I'm panicking now and thinking, I can't believe I came all the way here. I'm going to lose this opportunity. I don't know what to do. And I sort of look around and I see there's a VIP bathroom on the far right side of the room. So during Tim's speech, I just sort of sneak out of my chair and run to the bathroom. And there was a bouncer guarding it, but I just sort of begged if I could go inside. And he just let me go use the bathroom. And I ended up crouching in the bathroom stall for about 30 minutes with my ear pressed again. By the way, I'm not proud of this story. I do not recommend anyone do this, but this is just what happened. I ended up crouching in the bathroom for about 30 minutes, the smell of urine stinging my nostrils and my ears pressed against the wall. And I'm waiting to hear the sound. And sure enough, I hear the applause. And as soon as I hear the applause, I jump out of the bathroom. And sure enough, Tim Ferriss is standing about 5 feet in front of me, all by himself. And I don't know if you can relate to this, but when I am in those moments, when it lines up so perfectly like that, it's actually when I get the most nervous. And I even have a name for that feeling. I call it the flinch. It's that feeling when your throat tightens up, your mouth is wired shut, your feet turn to stone. And I just awkwardly stood in front of Tim Ferriss in front of a bathroom, staring at him. And almost to break myself out of the grip of the flinch, I just reached into my back pocket, handed him that Donor's Choose gift card. And I said, "This is for you." And he looks and he goes, "Oh, great. I know the founder of Donor's Choose. I went to high school with him." And I'm like, "Oh, you don't say." And he's like, "How do you know Donor's Choose?" I'm like, "Well, I'm actually working on a book right now." And he's like, "Oh, cool. What's your book about?" I'm like, "Well, I'm interviewing some of the world's most successful people. For business, I'm trying to interview Bill Gates. I'm trying to interview Lady Gaga. I'm trying to interview Jane Goodall. I'm trying to interview you." And he's like, "Haha, very funny." And I said, "No, I'm serious." And then I reached into my other pocket and gave him the 10 printed out emails. So he just looks at me, he's laughing, and he's like, "Let me look through these, but I'll get back to you in the next couple of days." And he was really nice. A couple of weeks go by, silence. So I emailed the assistant again, no response. Again and again. I ended up emailing his office over 32 times. And again, I do not recommend this, but I ended up emailing him 32 times until out of nowhere, I got an email saying, "Sure, Tim is available and he can talk in 2 days." And we did the interview, and the interview was amazing. And I learned a lot from the interview, particularly about how to properly cold email people, how to properly reach out to people. But one of the lessons that I missed in that moment was I thought the reason this whole journey worked to get to Tim was because I was so persistent. What I found out years later, when I actually met Tim properly and got to know him, as a person, was he told me the truth about what actually happened behind the scenes. Which is Tim was so annoyed and angry at me. He called his mutual friend, the person at Donor's Choose, and said, "What the fuck is this kid's problem?" And thank God, the person from Donor's Choose says, "Look, I know Alex is rough around the edges, but his heart's in the right place. And I think he's really trying to help his generation. I think this is a good idea." And that's why Tim said yes.
That's so interesting. It's so funny because we're always taught, be persistent, be persistent. But when you're on the other side and you're a busy person, it can get quite annoying if somebody, won't let up when you're busy or not interested and you've already clearly said, no, I'm busy or I can't do it. So he did teach you about persistence versus hassle. So do you want to kind of break that down for us?
I will say a big takeaway is that I always thought persistence was about knocking on one door 100 times. What I've had to learn is that persistence is about knocking on 100 different doors. And no business book talks about the dangers of over persistence, where you can knock on a door so many times that they put the deadbolt on and, call security on you. And again, persistence is not about knocking on one door 100 times. It's about knocking on 100 different doors. And it took me many years of mistakes to finally learn that.
Yeah. So let's get into the concept of the third door, because you already shared a couple stories that really illustrate this well. For example, Steven Spielberg, him jumping off the bus and kind of getting in film school in his own way. You hiding in the bathroom to meet Tim Ferriss. So what is the third door? It's, you talk about these doors like it's like getting into a nightclub. I'd love to hear that analogy.
Yeah. So after spending 10 years studying the world's most successful people, when I started, there was no part of me looking for that one key to success. We've all seen those business books or those TED Talks, and normally I just roll my eyes. But what ended up happening over 10 years of research is I started realizing every single one of these people treated life and business and success the exact same way. And the analogy that came to me is that it's sort of like getting into a nightclub. There's always 3 ways in. So there's the first door, the main entrance, where the line curves around the block, where 99% of people wait around hoping to get in. And we all know that line, people waiting out in the cold, hoping the bouncer lets them in. That's the first door. And then there's a second door, the VIP entrance, where the billionaires and celebrities go through. But what no one tells you, but I'm sure you've seen in your career many times, is that there's always the third door. And it's the entrance where you jump out of line, run down the alley, bang on the door 100 times, crack open a window, go through the kitchen. There's always a way in. And it doesn't matter if that's how Lady Gaga got her first record deal, how Spielberg, got his directing contract. They all took the third door.
Yeah. And it kind of sounds like you are saying that mentors can be like your key to the third door as well.
Absolutely.
Your shortcut. All right, cool. So let's talk about some of the big lessons that you learned from all of these interviews. You learned a lot about luck. You learned a lot about confidence. Tell us some of your favorite stories and lessons.
One of my favorite interviews was actually from Maya Angelo. And those of us who are familiar with Maya Angelou's work know that she's one of the most celebrated poets in American history. She is one of the best-selling authors of all time. Her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is still one of the top books. But what most people don't know is where her life came from. Maya Angelou was born in Stamps, Arkansas, or raised up in Stamps, Arkansas, at a time where the town was strictly divided between blacks and whites. And as a young black girl, she grew up at a time where you could see, crosses burning and lynchings, and, it was a very, very dark time in American history. And at about age 8 years old, she got raped by her mother's boyfriend. And when she told her brother what had happened a few days later, the brother, of course, did the right thing and told the mother. And the man was not only arrested, but a few days later, he was found dead behind a slaughterhouse. And what the 8-year-old Maya Angelou thought, because this is how kids' brains work sometimes, is that she thought that her using her words caused this man to die. So she became a mute and didn't speak to anyone for years. And her life continued to unfold full of tremendous challenges. She faced tremendous domestic abuse. She faced, teenage pregnancies. She, worked as a madam and a prostitute. She had, lots and lots and lots of challenges, faced racism at every corner. But what's so amazing about Maya Angelou to me is not the darkness she endured. It's how she turned that darkness into light. It's how she channeled her experiences into works of art and transform them into ways of healing for millions of people. And one of the things I asked her is and everyone in their own ways goes through those cloudy times. I know I've been through it. My dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passed a year later. I've had people I love go through, bouts of abuse and have to get out. And I was asking her almost selfishly, when you're stuck in the storm, when you're stuck with the clouds, what do you do? And she said, I want you to write. She literally, and she has a beautiful way of talking. She goes, young man, I want you to write this down on your notepad right now. And I said, yeah, of course. And I said, what do I do? And she said, I want you to write this down. This is a line I once heard from a country song, and I think it answers your question perfectly. And I said, of course. And she goes, write this down. Every storm runs out of rain. Every storm runs out of rain.
That's really powerful.
You just have to get to work. And what's so powerful about Maya Angelou is that because she had endured so much, she had this ability to help me get some perspective that, hard things happen, but they're impermanent. But you got to get to work. And one of my other favorite things she said, so I interviewed her the year before she passed away.
Wow.
And one of my final questions for her was, what's your final piece of advice for the next generation? And she said, get yourself out of the box. Try to understand that, Taoism works for some people. Give it a shot. Read Cesar Chavez. Read Martin Luther King. Read Nelson Mandela. Read. Not everything will work for you, but try it out and see what does work. There's all this wisdom out in the world. And if we stay holed up in our little boxes, we'll never see all of the wisdom and all the riches the world has to offer. And then she said this beautiful final line. She said, life is short no matter how long you live. Get to work.
That's so beautiful. You must feel so crazy that you've interviewed so many of these powerful people. Like that's all, you've got a pretty impressive track record in terms of who you interviewed.
Yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah. And so it took, when you're talking, it seems like Bill Gates was really like your big goal, your big audacious goal. As we were doing this interview, you kept mentioning like, oh, if I was waiting for Bill Gates or I finally got Bill Gates. So why was Bill Gates like such a big deal to you? I mean, you interviewed lots of other huge people. And what did you learn from him? Was it everything you hoped for? Because they always say like, don't meet your heroes in person. So like, was it everything you hoped for? You built it up quite a bit. And what did you learn?
I think about that line a lot, that don't meet your heroes. It cuts both ways. I've met my heroes and been disappointed. I've met my heroes and been shocked that they're even better than I could have imagined. With Bill Gates, the way this whole book got started, the way I even made this list was, it's a product of just being this like young, naive kid. And I sort of said, all right, when I make my list of people who I want to interview, I knew what I didn't believe in. And I knew I didn't believe in things like that, a Forbes algorithm of success. I knew that was not what I subscribed to. So I did what I do whenever I'm in trouble. I call my best friends for help. And I called my best friends, and one night we all gathered up, in my dorm room, and I said, guys, if we can make our dream university, who would be our professors? And that's how the list came to be. And then it became easy. Okay, for business, Bill Gates, for finance, Warren Buffett, for poetry, Maya Angelo, for science, Jane Goodall, for Latin American studies, Pitbull. Like, we're just these goofy kids. But that's really how the journey got started. And it was really by making that list that it sort of became this treasure map for the third door. And, when I met Bill Gates, I learned tremendous things. I learned his negotiating secrets. I learned a lot about his strategy of how he was able to, especially at an early age, talk about anyone who was young and profiting. It was Bill Gates in his 20s. And the strategy that he used. And my takeaway from that is, from my interview with Bill Gates, is the guy knew what he was doing, because even if he didn't go into software, if he had a hot dog stand, he would have had the biggest hot dog stand empire in America. Just because he really understood the mechanics of not only how to grow and work hard, but how to really strategize and think very long term. But I think when you spend 2 years fantasizing over anything, it never leads up to your fantasy.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
And some of the interviews that I wasn't even fantasizing about at all were the ones that changed my life in a major way too.
I can relate. And I'm the same way. Like I interviewed Deepak Chopra last week. You know what I mean? So I also have been interviewing these big people. And sometimes it's great. And sometimes it's like, yeah, that was good. And sometimes people surprise you that you didn't even think were going to. So to your point, it all just varies. So I would love to kind of talk about some of the stories that really resonated with me that I think my listeners will like. So Pitbull, he told you to always stay an intern. Can you talk to us about that one?
Oh, I love that. He talked about someone who, of course I was very excited, but who just blew me away with their authenticity and their wisdom was Pitbull. Again, it sort of doesn't match the persona at times. You watch a concert or music video of him and it's, popping bottles on a private jet. But you sit down with him and the guy is he's just sharp, he's so wise, so sharp. And his backstory isn't talked about much. What most people don't know about Pitbull is that he was born literally with cocaine in his blood. His mom was high when he was born. And what people also don't know is that Pitbull went to literally 8 different high schools over the course of 3 years. Because they had to move around so often. And, people do know a little that he was a drug dealer in high school. And what's so funny about the interview with Pitbull, this is not in the book, but I think you'll appreciate this. Pitbull's PR person said, no talking about drug dealing. I was like, great, no problem. You have my word. I will not ask a single question. And he's like, great. And I'm very in integrity in moments like that. If they're granting me that access, I'm very grateful. But for reasons I may never understand, about halfway through the interview, it was going so well that Pitbull just started opening up on his own and talking about all of the struggles he went through as a kid. And in hindsight, I think I know why. He was trying to explain to me how his life was this constantly, almost like a video game, trying to get to the next level. In high school, he was trying to survive and just make it out alive from the drug world. And then he was trying to just barely make it into the music world. Then he was trying to make money in the music world. Then he was trying to be the biggest musician out of Miami. Then he wanted to be the biggest musician in the world. And his life was like this video game, constantly leveling up. And he was telling me story after story after story. And at the end, he finally sat back in his chair when he was done telling me about all the different levels that he's worked on in his life. And he just sort of sat back. We were sitting on a balcony in Miami overlooking the sunset. And there was just a silence. And it was at the point in my journey where I was starting to become a better interviewer, and I learned to sometimes just let the silence sit. And I didn't say anything. And the silence just lasted for about a minute. And then he started just talking on his own. And he said, a few weeks ago, I was with Carlos Slim Jr., who, as you know, is one of the richest people on earth, the richest person in Mexico. And he goes, I was with Carlos Slim and I told him, I want to be your intern. I'll get donuts for you. I'll get coffee. I just want to sit around and shadow you and see how you operate. And at first you hear something like that and you think he must be exaggerating or, joking, but I looked in his eyes and I said, this is probably the most serious thing he said the whole interview. And I was looking at him and I was realizing here's a person who can perform at Madison Square Garden. And he's talking about how he genuinely has a deep desire to be an intern for someone else at this stage in his life. And Pitbull kept explaining, he goes, look, I can walk around a music label like a king. But at night, what people don't know is I'm walking around the offices of Apple and Google taking notes. And what I learned from Pitbull is that the best executives, the best entrepreneurs who are constantly leveling up in their career do it because they are never satisfied with being an executive. They constantly want to stay an intern.
Hmm.
And if you want to be the Mufasa, if you want to be the king of the Pride Land, you have to be Simba as well. You have to hold both at the same time, because the moment you're comfortable being at the top is the moment you begin to fall. And for Pitbull, it wasn't just about a strategy of success. It was who he was. And by staying an intern in all areas of his life, it's what allowed him to continue to level up. So the key to growth is to constantly go back to the bottom again.
Oh my gosh, I resonate with this so much. That is such a great lesson for everyone to have heard. So there's one more secret to success that I want to uncover. This one actually comes from one of your mentors, Elliot Bisnow, and he taught you to bite off more than you can chew. Now, this is very counterintuitive. Usually it's don't bite off more than you can chew. So tell us about that one.
So one of the things I learned from Elliot, and sometimes the best lessons are the ones that you're never explicitly said. They're the ones you just learn. What I learned from Elliot is that, and it's true for all of us, we're all more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And I truly mean that. From all my years of studying success, all my years of meeting readers of The Third Door, people are more capable than they give themselves credit for. And this idea of bite off more than you can chew, you'll figure out how to chew later, is essentially giving yourself the credit you deserve, which is that you'll figure it out. You might not have the ability now, but you can grow, you can learn, you can try for new things. And by the way, he didn't say bite off more than you can chew. It's so easy and fun. No, he said you'll figure it out later. And the reality is it's hard, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, you want to cry. But what's interesting, and this is a big thing I want to share with everyone, is that in the world of fitness, I think, if we polled 10 random people on a street and said, hey, if you can only lift 50 pounds on the bench press and you wanted to lift 150 pounds by the end of the year, how would you do it? 9 out of 10 people would know the answer. Well, you go 50 pounds, 55, 60, 65. Oh, you tore your muscle. Now you go back down to 55 and you work your way up slowly until you get there. But in the world of business, in the world of entrepreneurship, you ask someone, well, your business is this size and you want it to be this size. How'd you do it? 9 out of 10 people have no idea what to even say. And the truth is, it works exactly the same way. All these skills that we need in entrepreneurship, whether it's sales, strategy, pitching, storytelling, business development, are all learnable. Except when you go to the gym, it's much more obvious what to do. In entrepreneurship, it can be a bit more tricky. But the truth is, it's all learnable. You can learn to be a better storyteller. You can learn to be better at sales. You can learn to be a better marketer. Now, what people think is they either got it or they don't got it. And they try it, they don't have it the first time, and they give up. But what Elliot's advice was, bite off more than you can chew. He's like, all the other things you'll figure out on your own. I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten.
Yeah. So let's stick on this concept of mentorship. You are a mentor. I know you do some mentorship groups and things like that. You have a couple mentors. I think Cal Fussman is another one of your mentors. So how do you go about finding and selecting a mentor? What's your advice on that?
Yeah, I didn't do much selecting. I was very much like a beggar, taking whatever I could get. I think the thing about mentorship is, the reality is I wanted hundreds of people to be my mentors. When I was 19, I wanted Tim Ferriss to take me under his wing and spend every day teaching. People have different constraints in their life.
Yeah.
Tim's really busy. He's got a lot going on. He already does a lot to give out all of his knowledge out to the world. The reason it worked with Elliot Bisnow is because at the time, no one really knew him. With Cal Fussman, essentially the same thing. No one had heard of him outside of, the writing world. And I'll share a piece of advice someone once gave me. And his name is Will McDonough. And at the time I met him, he was a vice president at Goldman Sachs. And I asked Will essentially, what makes a mentor want to spend time with a mentee? And he said from his experience, it's one of 3 reasons. Number one, the mentor sees a part of themselves in the mentee. Number two, the mentor wants to make the mentee a bit more like them, sort of pull them in their direction. Number three, which I think is the most interesting one, is the mentor sees something in the mentee that they want to cultivate in their lives. So they want to spend time with that young person. And that one didn't make any sense to me because in my mind, what the hell could any of these successful people want from a young person? But now that I've seen, so many stories unfold, the truth is you would be surprised that an executive in their 60s or 70s is missing something in their life. And what they're missing a lot of times is that sense of possibility, that sense of hope, that sense of there's always a way, that sense of a dreamer. Because they had that too in the beginning. And sometimes it's even more practical. I remember when I was spending time with Larry King and his friends, I was like showing them how to use an iPad. I was like showing them what Snapchat is. So sometimes it was even as practical as literally teaching them things that they were curious about. But the best mentor relationships have all three. The mentor sees a part of themselves in you. The mentor wants to teach you things to pull you in their direction, but also the mentor wants you to rub off on them. And I think the third thing I didn't understand at the time, but that actually is in your control a bit. You can choose to be a positive person. You can choose to be kind and nice and a dreamer and excited about life. You can't really choose if the mentor sees themselves in you but you can choose how you show up in the world. And even if you talk to 100 different mentors and 95 of them think you're an idiot and don't want time with you, the 5 who do will change your life, and that's all you need.
This is really, really good stuff. So, Alex, you spent the pandemic giving free coaching away, basically. You were doing mentorship programs. What did you see? Why did you see there was a need for that? What was happening where you felt like you needed to kind of open that channel for people? And what were people feeling? And what is your advice to people who are feeling similar that may not have been involved in your mentorship programs?
Yeah, for me, I didn't see it at the time as coaching or mentorship. I saw it as, when I had started writing The Third Door, almost 12 years ago now. The book came out a few years ago, but it's essentially been this 10-year labor of love. The original intention was I wanted to go on this mission and, gather all this, knowledge and tools and put it in a book to help people who are struggling just like me. And while people have read the book who are executives at, Merrill Lynch and MasterCard and Nike and Disney, in my heart, it was always that young, scrappy person who has a big dream. That was my original intention for the book. And when the pandemic hit originally back in 2020, I couldn't have expected that essentially my inbox became flooded with all of these readers who I had met over book tours and book signings and things like that, really struggling, losing jobs, having family members who are sick, sometimes being, stuck at home with abusive parents. And I didn't really know what to do because a part of me loved these people, but a part of me had no idea how to help people I barely knew. And thankfully, a mentor of mine by the name of Cal Fussman said, why don't you just, meet with people publicly 1 hour a day on Zoom and just answer their questions about what they're dealing with? And I said, that is such a stupid idea. That does not scale. That doesn't, who would even want that? I thought that was the worst idea. I said, do you know what would be a good idea? Why don't I just take some time and write everything I've learned over the years into a second book and then share it with them then? And Cal said, well, it took you 7 years to write your first book. I don't think your second book will get there in time. He's like, why don't you just meet people where they are? So I decided to I just posted on Twitter and on Instagram. And I said, look, 1 hour a day, I'll be here in this Zoom room sharing, the lessons I learned over this 10 years of research. Whoever wants to come, by all means, come. no pressure. And, it was a pandemic. People were losing their jobs. I said, this is completely free. There's no course. There's nothing. It's just, I'm here to help how I can, if I can. And what ended up happening was a miracle. People from all over the world came together. We had people from Nigeria and India and Japan and, single mothers from Colorado and college students from Florida. There was a person in Nebraska on their tractor zooming in. There's all these different people. And what's amazing is the people who showed up were the people who were betting on themselves. And a lot of times it was people who couldn't afford, a fancy course from a self-help author. It was people who needed help but wanted to help themselves. And it was a big honor for me to hold that space with them. And what was supposed to be just for a couple of weeks, we ended up doing it for over a year and a half.
Wow.
And while I ended it after a year and a half so I could focus on my next book and my next projects, I'm still in contact with them. I'm still on the phone with them. They're just these remarkable people. And I love them dearly. And they helped me more than I could have possibly helped them.
Yeah, it's that two-way mentee-mentor relationship that you were talking about just earlier.
Yeah.
So what is your best pieces of advice as we wrap up the interview to everybody out there who may be struggling still? It's 2 years after COVID. A lot of people have found their feet. A lot of people are going through like a crisis where they have no idea what they want to do with their careers and they're quitting their jobs. It's a great resignation, as you are definitely familiar with. So what's your advice to people who feel like stuck, like they might want to quit their job or they just quit their job and they have no idea what to do next?
I have different tools that if people want a practical answer. One thing I have is a thing called the 30-day clarity challenge. So if that's something you can just type that into Google with my name and it'll pop up.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah, you're much more advanced than I am at this. But if I had to share a final thought, know that success and failure are not opposites. I think I personally can get so caught up in, am I succeeding or am I failing? Am I succeeding or am I failing? But the biggest thing I've learned from 12 years of studying success is that success and failure are not opposites. They're different sides of the same coin. They're both a result of the same thing. They're both a result of trying. So the opposite of success isn't failure. The opposite of success is not trying. And if I have one wish for everyone listening, it's that you unattach yourself from success and you unattach yourself from failure and instead commit yourself to trying and growing, because that's what will change your life forever.
Awesome. So we're going to close out the interview with a couple questions that I ask all my guests, and then we do a couple fun things at the end of the year with them. The first one is, what is one piece of actionable advice that our listeners can do today to become more profiting tomorrow?
Look yourself in the mirror every morning and say, I love you.
Ooh. And what is your secret to profiting in life?
Know exactly what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. Because if you're chasing, a salary, or if you're chasing a certain amount of money in your bank account, I'm going to tell you a secret. When you get to that, the goalpost is going to keep moving. So if you're not very clear about what you want and why you want it, you're in for a life of chasing shit that does not satisfy you.
And where can our listeners learn more about you and everything that you do?
The Third Door is available wherever people like to buy books. So whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or if you like audio, it's on Audible and I narrate the audiobook. And if you end up, getting the book because of this podcast, let me know on, Instagram or Twitter. It's just at Alex Banayan.
Amazing. So I'll stick your link for your book in the show notes. And what about your next book? Can you tease that out a little bit?
I'm working on it right now, slowly. It's in the same genre, but takes a little different approach.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to have you back for that one, Alex. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was such a joy.
Thanks for listening to Young and Profiting Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please write us a review or comment on your favorite platform. Nothing makes us happier than reading your reviews. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family, and on social media. I always repost, reshare, and support those who support us. You can find me on Instagram at Yap with Hala or LinkedIn. Just search for my name. It's Hala Taha. Big thanks to the Yap team as always. This is Hala signing off.